Hey everybody, we're back to get our vision checked. A little bit of a special video this week because it dawned on me that perhaps more than just watching yours truly go through the vision test on chess.com and maybe offering some quick tips along the way, if we're lucky, actually talking about how you can build this muscle and what some of the exercises you can do, some of which I'm hoping to develop into products and features eventually on our site, chess.com, and some that you can do on your own if you're actually an ambitious chess player looking to push the ceiling on your own ability to calculate, whether it's play blindfold games or to just visualize and keep track of things in your head. So one of the first things I want to stress is that visualizing the board, and when you close your eyes, not just seeing random green and white squares or black and white squares, but actually knowing, the spacing and the presence of every square and where they are in correlation to the pieces you're imagining moving in your head is very important, because it's something that is what truly governs whether or not you make blunders or not. I've said this before, but I want to elaborate on why. Often what ends up happening in a calculation sequence is that at a certain point somebody loses track of where something is, whether it's the opponent's piece on a long file or diagonal or even up close, or they forgot they took a piece, or you just spend time after a few moves trying to evaluate, do I feel positionally better here, strategically, did this help my plan, whatever, and less on where are the concrete placements of the pieces now, and are there any new tactics that weren't there before. New tactics being missed is what you end up seeing in the middle of that line, right? So you commit to the line, and then 2-3 moves into the line, actually playing the line with your opponent, you're like, oh wait, I can't keep going for this because at the end of this line I'm losing. That happened in the beginning of the commitment to the variation. And so that's why you want to work on this. So some tools I recommend you do with a partner especially, or if you're a coach, a dad, a mom, a dad, a coach, anybody who cares about the success of another young person, one exercise I recommend is you can hang a chessboard above their bed, or every night before they go to bed have them close their eyes and go through what all the squares are, so that you know it's not just a parlor trick or random guesswork. You can push them at first to remember the colors of the squares, and then eventually the full diagonals, then eventually come up with routes of the pieces, until eventually you can challenge them to do an exercise that the Soviet chess school did often, that I was actually taught by Gregory Kardanoff, and I'm going to display all of those for you here. So first thing you can do, I just did a test here. I did a 30 for 30. It was pretty good. Not my best work, but 30 for 30 is not bad. What we're going to do now is actually bring back the coordinates and actually throw on my adorable little blindfold here, because hey, everybody needs a branded blindfold, and I want to prove to you that this is about remembering the coordinates. If I can make this thing fit on my head, I think I can, my big head. So it's about remembering the board beyond just this vision trainer, right? We all love when we do the vision trainer and it says B1 or G8 or whatever, right? So you're guessing it, but you can use your eyes, and our vision trainer helps build that muscle as far as your speediness, and the faster you get, the more you should be able to do, which should reflect your full board awareness. But here's an exercise you can do to start. So pretending you guys ask me, so G5, black, right? Name D8, H4 diagonal. I go D8, E7, F6, G5, H4. And now you guys can see that I know the board, right? So we start with F1, E2, D3, C4, B5, A6. Name B1 to H7, B1, C2, D3, E4, F5, G6, H7. Move a knight from G1 to G8 as quickly as possible. So knight on G1 moves to, there's several ways to do it, knight to F3, knight to E5, knight to G6, knight to E7, knight to G8. I think that's the fastest. We could also go knight H3, knight F4, knight H5, knight F6, knight G8. I think that's the same route. Move a knight, move a queen from E1 to A8 as quickly as possible. You go queen E1 to E4 to A8, or something like this. Now, the exercise you can get to eventually are two things. One, the first Soviet exercise I'm going to give you is visualize that there's a queen on D5, okay? I wish I had highlighted this before, because now I'm blindfolded. These are real world problems here, right, everybody? So let me highlight this for you, just so you know. Oh, I can't use highlights on our vision board. Imagine the queen on D5, black queen on D5, and I have a white knight on A1. So move the knight to every square on the board without ever touching a square that is attacked by the queen on D5. So for example, if I had a knight on A1 and I moved it to B3, that loses. But how can I get my knight to C1 if I don't go to B3? Well, the other access point is obviously E2, because A2, D3, and B3 are all taken, right? So let's see. We start with a knight on A1, put a few seconds on the clock. Let's see how fast I can do this. So knight on A1 goes knight to C2, knight to A3, knight to B1, knight to C3, knight to E2, knight to C1, knight back to E2, C3, B1, A3, C2, B4, A6, C7, E8, F6, H7, F8, G6, E7, C8, B6, A4, B2, back to A4, back to C3, back to B1, back to A3, back to C2, back to E3, back to C2, back to E1. Let's go back to C2 to E3 to F1 to G3, to F1 to H2 to G4 to F2 to H3 to G1 to E2 to F4 to G6 to H4, back to G6, back to H8, back to G6, back to F8 to H7 to F6 to G4 to F2, back to G4 to H2. From H2, let's go to F1. Knight to G3, not sure I named that one yet. Knight back to F1, knight to E3, knight again to C2. And then I think back to A1. Did I get them all? I think I did. So you have to bring the knight back when you're done. That's part of the rule. So if we had another partner here highlighting the squares as I spoke, it might be a little easier. But I think I followed the route. And the point is, you can challenge yourself to do this faster and faster. And if your opponent or partner ever steps on a square, you can buzz them, maybe even with like an electric shocker like Bill Murray uses on the Ghostbusters, right? Hashtag that's going to be the worst remake ever. Did anybody ask for a remake of Ghostbusters? The answer is no. Anyway, so this is one exercise. Now let's talk about another exercise where you can actually make it progressively more difficult. We start out with, let's say, a bishop on D5, a rook on G2, and a knight on F4. Okay, they're all the same color. Now, what you have to do is name every piece that is defended or attacked by one of your pieces. So in this case, we would name rook on G2 and bishop on D5, because the knight on F4 hits the bishop on D5, and the bishop and the knight both hit the rook on G2. But if we move the rook in this position from G2 to G7, now the only piece we would name is D5, the bishop on D5. So you need a partner for this because you need them to challenge you. If you're moving these pieces yourself, by definition, your brain is sort of locked in and you're sort of subconsciously choosing a square that's either safe or protected, depending on whatever you choose that round. So you need somebody to tell you, rook to G7, and now knight to H5, and here you would say rook on G7, because now the bishop isn't defended anymore. Then the rook moves to A7. Now you would say none, or you would say pass if you're playing this game with a partner. And you see how quickly you can do it. And then eventually, let's say we have this knight on H5, bishop on D5, rook on A7. Let's add another piece, bishop on E3. Now you say rook on A7, because there's a bishop on A3. And so you push yourself, and then after that, the knight goes to F4. So now you say knight on F4, rook on A7. Then the rook goes to A3, and you say bishop on E3, knight on F4. Oh, sorry, and bishop on D5. That's right, because the knight came back to F4. So the point is this sort of keeping track. If somebody was really challenging you, and imagine now add a few pieces, and I'm moving the pieces all over the board. Remember, we initially started with rook on G2, knight on F4, bishop on D5. But as the pieces are being moved all over the board, your ability to keep track of those things in your brain is very reflective to your ability to calculate a really long combination and not make any sort of blunders. We see top players make blunders like this all the time in Blitz and Rabbit, right? They make a combination and they forgot that a piece was defended, that it wasn't defended before. And so at the highest level, even all games are eventually lost because of a mistake at some point in this way. You could say maybe it's a mistake on a 30-move deep level where someone misevaluates where a piece is and it has to do with a strategical weakness of a pawn, or it can be a blunder. But either way, eventually something is lost because of your ability, or inability to calculate properly, to keep things organized, and to properly anticipate your opponent's threats, which is what visualization is all about, properly anticipating your opponent's threats so that you can execute your plans and not misplace or miscalculate what might eventually happen to you. So there you go. There's my little speech for today. Oh my God, I look like a badass with that bandana, Daniel LaRusso. Right, look at that. Let's do that. Right, that's a good GIF. If somebody makes a GIF of this, you're awesome. Anyway, so let me do one exercise while you guys can see it here. We'll see if I can do a little more than 30. Let's hide the coordinates. Let's go back to showing no coordinates so we can start fresh. Ready, set, go. G5, A2, H4, H8, A6, G8, B1, E4, H5, C2. Going slow. I feel like I'm going slow. I feel like I'm going slow. Go faster, Danny. You are so old. I was clicking F3. I was clicking F3. Okay. But we got 31 out of 31. And this is more just like a speed, kind of challenge for yourself to try to recognize how well you're doing. Full board awareness, right? And then of course you can bump up to moving not just the squares but the pieces too. And so this video though was much more about really giving some valuable takeaways to my followers. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and know that at some point, for those of you who are premium members and are like, Danny, stop giving away all your really in-depth teaching advice. Just go back to playing bullet brawls and being an idiot. Save those for chess.com. But, more and more, we have more and more video lectures on chess.com that are so in-depth by so many great authors. I'm really just trying to do everything I can to help, let's just get more and more good chess content all over the web and not just keep all the awesome premium stuff at chess.com, but also everywhere that people can find it. So please enjoy this. Please enjoy this. You're going to do whatever you want. So thanks for watching. I'll just say that, and then we'll go ahead and bring the video to an end. Thanks.